I'm gonna show you two things in this video, how and why. As for the how, well, I don't have a lot of big tools. My main tools are a budget track saw and a trim router. And well, that's all you really need. As I'm breaking down this MDF, let's talk about the why. Before I landed on my final design, I went through countless others, like this one. A popular look these days, for sure. But my issue with this is there's no room for the mirror cabinet. And this is where my obsession for min-maxing all the storage space I could began. In the spirit of trying to cram a lot into a small space, I will try to squeeze over a month of work into 2 videos. This one will be all about the mirror cabinet, and the next one about the sink and the lower cabinet. So far I have got the sides of the cabinet, so I can start putting it all together now. I intentionally left the 2 sides deeper, so I can have room for the backer wall that is going to square up the whole box itself. And just to make sure, I'm gonna check both diagonals. Then I can add the French cleat in the back that I will use later to mount on the wall. For all the wood in this build, I used ash. These 20mm planks were already plain smooth, so there's not much to it other than cutting them into size. This particular plank gave me 8 shelves that I can now shape with the router. First is a groove for a kind of a makeshift shelf bracket. And then a 25-degree bevel, or a rounder, whatever you wanna call it. Now the shelf brackets really did end up being an afterthought, since I had already glued together the cabinet, and routing anything in there now is a bit tricky. Oh well, this part doesn't need to look pretty anyway, just function. I ended up gluing some Baltic birch in the slots, so the shelves can rest on those on final assembly. The real hurdle for me ended up being the door. I couldn't use regular cabinet hinges, cause the mixer tap would get in the way. And every sliding door solution I have seen so far has the sliding hardware visible, which I absolutely hate. In my infinite wisdom, I decided to just turn the sliders around the corner. Surely no one else has thought of this. Well, we'll come back to that later. First, we need to make a frame around the plywood door, and there's really 2 things I need here. First is a groove, so that the frame sits flush with the plywood back. This also gives me the ability to make it removable, in case I ever need to service the LEDs. The second groove was for the LED diffuser. And finally, a 25-degree bevel. For the diffuser I used acrylic. I lucked out since I had one big enough so I could cut it out of one piece. This way I can avoid any visible seams. Well, the most normal people a detail like that wouldn't even register. But more so, the bigger benefit is that gluing together acrylic can sometimes be a bit finicky. Repairability was another thing I really wanted in my design, but kinda struggled to figure out. To keep the weight down, the plywood backing is only 6mm thick, but also a meter in height, so it has a lot of flex to it. To give it some stiffness, I plan to glue the frame in place, but when the LEDs go out someday, it becomes just as repairable as an Apple product. I ended up making 6 tabs from stainless steel and some threaded inserts. I made them as low profile as possible, so they won't get in the way when opening the door. And now access to LEDs is just a few bolts away. So one night while browsing for a switch for the LEDs, I discovered one that looked much more interesting than the regular ones. Of course now I couldn't have discovered it the day earlier, when the LEDs were not in place yet. But that's just how it goes sometimes. So I need to do some barbaric cutting, since it's a sort of a proximity switch that needs to be behind the mirror. And I will also run the wires behind the mirror as well. What I mean by sort of a proximity switch is that it promises to work through all kind of materials, up to 6mm. I ended up testing it with basically everything that was under 6mm, and it worked. So a mirror shouldn't be a problem, right? Well, this is the moment my heart nearly stopped. Turns out the coating they put behind the mirror to make it, well, a mirror, it stops any kind of signals from the switch. So to pierce that coating to expose some of the glass, I used diamond coated drill bits and a drill press for a steady circle. It's important to go very slowly and just lightly kiss the surface, otherwise there will be tear out. Now, with my heart rate back to normal, I can glue in the mirror onto the plywood backer board using some flexible silicone adhesive. And while the adhesive is still setting, I can also glue in my inside profile, which will center the mirror into the right spot. I needed a spot to stash basically all of my electronic components, like the LED driver brick. I made a little cupboard on the top of the cabinet from a scrap piece of MDF and installed some magnets on the side of the cabinet, so I can basically have a little hidden door. Some of you eagle-eyed viewers probably already noticed, but the wood is already stained and cleared. I won't have time to get into the details in this video, but in the next one I'll show you all about the chemical side. I might be biased, but I think it's gonna be pretty exciting. While the clear coating might be exciting, the painting isn't. Probably because I'm using regular pre-cut thinner based paints, and this might be the last time using these commercial paints, just because it dries so slowly. Now this is where a montage of the finished cabinet should be. As you can see, that's not the case. Instead, I'm fidgeting with the sliders. Now, they did work when I did the test run before, but at the end of the travel there was a little bit of sag, which is also probably why I didn't see anyone else do this before. After all the hard work I put into it, I couldn't let that one thing sour the whole project for me. But I also couldn't find any replacement sliders that had a low profile and were meant to take this kind of directional load. Basically, out of desperation, I ended up buying some undermount drawers, which looked like they might work better. To get it low profile, I ended up cutting off the mounting plate and welding in some plates I had made myself. I did have to modify the back a bit, but I could also use that opportunity to make sort of a makeshift handle at the bottom. And then I can install the undermount slides basically like you would do it in a normal cabinet. And boy am I glad I took the time to rethink the sliders. It's now been around 2 months or so since I finished the cabinet, and yes, that's how long it takes me to edit these. Anyway, I would have hated the other slides, and who knows how long they would have lasted like that anyway. With these ones, it just feels premium opening the door, and it also comes with a nice soft close. In the next video, I'll be confused by some drawers and I will talk about putting an undermount sink in a wooden countertop.